As I say at school, what is your name? Is it Chapin? Chapin, Chapin? And I mean, I've heard so many different versions of it. We ought to establish that to start with.
Well, my name is Harry Chapin, and it actually came. See, it came in 1066 with the Norman invasion of England. William the Conqueror had a lackey somewhere in the lower realms of his force, and his name was Chapin. And over the years, it became anglicized to Chapin.
Mm-hmm.
And Deacon Samuel Chapin, a guy in 1637 who was out of favor here in England, went over to America and founded Springfield, Massachusetts. And I'm a direct male descendant from old Deacon Sam. As a matter of fact, the only other two famous members of my family were Ezra Chapin, who was the first guy ever to be executed for incest in Massachusetts history, and Dwight Chapin, who was the guy recently put in jail as one of Nixon's, more enticing, crew. So all in all, I've got a tremendous legacy to live up to.
I've got to be fair. What about the other Chapins? I mean, what about the present family setup? Where were you born?
Well, we were all New Yorkers, really, born and bred, and I've come from. I got four real brothers, and then a whole bunch of half brothers and half sisters. Between my mother and father, they've had 12 different kids in various, combinations and permutations. We're not Catholic either, surprisingly, but it just basically East Coast, United States, around New York area. I grew up on West 11th Street down by the docks, right in between a maximum security federal penitentiary and the M&M Trucking Company, which on odd moments at various nights used to back into our house. And indeed, 3 months after we moved out, when I was 11, a truck backed into the house and it fell down. So had that kind of upbringing. But, really, Noel, the thing that was extraordinary, you always hear about these poor little rich boys, people that grew up in tremendous financial security and all kinds of worldly goods, but very little love, and they sort of become raisins instead of grapes, Well, I was a rich little poor boy. I grew up in an environment of writers, painters, teachers, musicians, philosophers, filmmakers, poets, sculptresses, in Greenwich Village at a time when this was before even the whole burst of folk music made it world famous. It was a tremendous, wonderful family neighborhood. And that time, the specific area I lived in was part Irish and part Italian, but an awful lot of writers and artistic people lived in that environment. And so all I could say is I probably had one of the most privileged upbringings of all time, in the sense of excitement and kinds of examples of people who are asking interesting questions about their lives and the lives of people around them.
Does corruption fascinate you? Do you ever admire corruption?
No, but I admire passion. I'm not a Johnny One Note. I'm very involved in hunger. I'm very involved in politics. I'm very involved. This isn't my little pet charity. That's not where my head is at. To me, I would love to feel, when I am dead, that I've had a sway on certain things. I think every one of us would. And the ironic thing is, a perfect example is Ralph Nader. Here's a guy who just went to law school and is probably one of them, he's always number 1, 2, or 3 in the most admired Americans. And by dint of his commitment to something larger than himself, thus he becomes larger, thus he gets more rewards, not in a monetary sense, because he takes less than $8,000 a year. So many of us are so dumb. What the hell do I want with a limousine? What the hell do I want with a Learjet or a yacht? If I really wanted one, I could get one, and if it would really make me happy, it would work out fine. But I'm afraid I'm not that simple-minded. I really don't believe it.
One thing that sprung to mind when you were talking about Harry Chapin, as if he was sitting next to you, do you like him?
I like him a good deal of the time, and when I don't like him, I kick him in the ass and try to get him over where I like him. And I'm lucky that way, because I got a family around me who is not awed by me at all. They're all people that do as many creative things as I do, if not more. My wife is very willing to tell me I'm a damn idiot. If I try to write as qualitative music as I can and just do it with as much belief as I can, and if I don't believe it, change it, and integrate that with my family life, integrate that with my political feelings and my business sense, all of this stuff is making sense. It's integrating. It's making a life that, to me, is terribly exciting. And I can't ask for anything more than that, except that, by God, let's keep it going. Let's, when you want something done, there's an old saw, ask a busy man. Well, I'm trying to be a busy man, and I'm trying to get some things done. And it's, by God, it's exciting. I mean, this whole English adventure over the last year. Last November, the first time I really came over with the idea that I was going to start making an investment to be an entity in England and Ireland and Scotland. And I came over again in February. I came over again in April and did 4 concerts in Manchester, London, and in Dublin and Belfast. I came again in June and July. Did some European TV stuff and Germany stuff. Then I'm back here in the fall doing 10 concerts, 8 concerts, whatever it is. And I'll be back again next spring. And the whole thing, irrespective of, the almighty hit or the almighty, all those things that are the standard things you have to supposedly mark yourself by, it's happening. And that's because I'm doing something that I believe in. It's something that's different. It's got a shape. It's got a vision. There are people like you who have believed in me for a lot of years. And you're sort of famous for your ears. In some cases, I guess you made mistakes. Maybe I'm one of them, but I appreciate the fact that you've given voice to me. See, one of the extraordinary things about many people in the entertainment business, like myself, we don't realize how important our ambassadors are. Everything from the promotion men and salesmen, and most especially the music directors and the disc jockeys and the stations, who really give us voice. Because without that whole incredible electronic multiplying effect does not occur. WOLD is a song that really was triggered by Taxi, ironically enough. And that's because after Taxi came out, my record company sent me all around the country to meet disc jockeys. And there were 3 types. There were the young comers who saw the world ahead of them as a giant apple ready to be juicily bitten into. There were the guys in their prime who sort of stood astride the business, like you do here in the British Isles. And there were the older guys who were holding on by their fingernails, desperately trying to continue to relate, 45 going on 15. And I met a bunch of those. And that was, to me, the ultimate, example of, okay, we all go there. The question is, how do we continue relating?
One of the songs I really do like is The Bananas.
That has been such a...
I'm very interested in cars, trucks, whatever. I think it's lovely. The bit I really do like in it, having sort of had the odd accident, thankfully not on the road, but on race circuits and things, is the bit where he says Christ, and he calls out the only name. Funny how he called out the only name that could help. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, ironically enough, when I wrote that as a poem, and it was a comment on basically Vietnam body counts. I mean, we get so involved with statistics, and we don't think of the human story behind it. So it was a piece of black comedy. The point is very simple. The song seems to have a kind of bizarre life force within it, within its craziness. But the original urge was very simple. I was coming through Scranton, Pennsylvania in 1965. An elderly gentleman did get in and tell me the story of this event. And to put a weird little kicker on it, to show you how life can come around double-edged, I got a call about 2 years ago from a lawyer who was calling for the sister of the guy who was killed. And he had no legal basis to ask me. He said, you're coming to Scranton. They're using Bananas very much on the radio as a commercial for the concert. Would you please ask them to stop it? And she asked me to tell you one thing. The only 2 times she's seen her parents cry were one when their son was killed, my brother, and the other time was when his 2 children came home from school, when all the kids in school were singing that song at him. Now, all of a sudden, my whole, vision of the song radically changed at that moment, because you suddenly realize, okay, if you are a person like myself writing from real life, you suddenly find yourself in a strange way kicking people you didn't mean to kick at all. Matter of fact, I went and visited the family and talked to them, and I said I wasn't trying to hurt them, and that indeed that night I wouldn't do it just for them, but I would be doing the song in the future, and I didn't feel that it was meant as any disrespect. The other irony was, at another concert in Illinois, Normal, Illinois, of all places, I sang a song called Sniper, which I'm very proud of. I think it's one of the best things I've done. And halfway through the song, a distinguished gentleman with a beard sitting in the 3rd row jumped up and ran out, and evidently in some distress. And I asked about it later, and nobody knew until I asked one person who was also older and said, oh, didn't you know that was the head of the English department here, whose son was killed by that sniper, the guy Charles Whitmore in Texas. and he became an alcoholic for about 3 years. Was absolutely, an absolute wreck, and pulled himself back together and worked himself. And is a fantastic teacher and this and the other. Well, I feel very strongly about that song. I think it captures something that for 15 years we've been seeing more and more of.
Did you have any contact with him?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't able to. But here's an example where if you are trying to write serious material, and it's amazing how you can sometimes really have an impact that you didn't necessarily want to have. In general, I have to say that sense of recognition that I aim for in the human spirit, and by the way, I mean, frankly, Harry Chapin is the villain of almost all his songs. I'm not writing from a superior point of view, and especially the male-female relationships. It's usually I'm always the blind one who's myopic and doing something dumb at this point or the other. And frankly, I give that as a lesson to young songwriters. If you're going to say something nice about somebody, make it about somebody else in your songs. And if you're going to say something nasty, make it about yourself. And automatically people will trust you more because they know that you're not just trying to do a puff bit. During the 60s, I used to write a lot of songs about how I was such a wonderful stud or something. And by God, I used to bomb every time. People only started listening when they realized what a fool I was. The fact is, I've got the best job in the world. And I am frightened that someday somebody's going to wake me up and say, Harry, we found you out. You have to go take a real job now. Because I've got the best job. I make an awful lot of money. I have a tremendous ego gratification from an awful lot of people. I define my own product. I'm not selling toilet paper that people wanted before. Nobody wanted Chapin music before I did it. I define the times I work, the places I work, and I can do a tremendous amount of, if I do a qualitative job of seducing people with some of my ideas. Fantastic gig.
Harry Chapin talking to Noel Edmonds. The program was produced by Johnny Beerling.
I Want to Learn a Love Song is the song about how I met my wife. I was giving her guitar lessons. I've sort of telescoped the time a little. We didn't have our first encounter on the couch, but she was just splitting up her first marriage, and was trying to do some new things. I think it's a sensible thing when you're breaking up some old situation to try to have some new inputs. She didn't realize that how much of a new input I was going to be, but I, after a while, realized what an incredible woman she was, and stopped charging her the $10 an hour that I talk about. And I would have to say it's been the best decision of my life. And indeed, the lyrics of Cats in the Cradle come from a poem of hers that was zinging me for running around the country worrying about being successful and not enough about the kids. So I've got a distant early warning system who's very close to me, who happens to be, whenever Harry Chapin gets off in some crazy situation, gives me a kick in the pants.
What does money mean at the moment? I mean, you're in an industry where people are reputed to be earning vast sums of money. You come from a country which is supposedly very, very wealthy and the land of opportunity. What does it mean to you and your family?
Well, this year I'll be giving away $700,000 of stuff that I've earned through benefits.
When you say giving it away, does that mean you're turning your talents to earning the money, or has that money once been yours?
Well, it just depends. On a tax situation, I'd be crazy if I actually took it myself and then.
Right.
But when you do a benefit concert, and I'd probably do more than anybody else in the United States, let's be very clear. It would be nice to think that people came there because they were concerned about starving children or lobbying for a better, saner energy policy or ecology or various political candidates or any of the many things, diseases that need some money invested to solve them. But in fact, they come for the performer. On the tax situation in the United States, you're only allowed to give away 30% of what you make without having it be taxed, which is dumb, because I should, encourage as much people to give away to recognize charities as much as possible. So since I give away more than 30%, I do benefits, and instead of saying Harry Chapin on the concert contract, it'll say World Hunger Year or Public Interest Research Group or various things like that. So I by definition, can't run it through my own finances.
The benefit concerts, charity concert, whatever, isn't sort of that big over here. We have a few, but you're almost making it sound as if there is a tour, there is something going on all the time. That's quite a claim. You do more than most. Can you explain a little bit about the scene?
Well, I think I'll go one step farther, and because I'm proud of it. I do more than anybody. The only, of course.
Why?
Well, number one, when people ask me why I'm involved in things like this, I say very clearly that we are a participatory democracy in the United States and here in England. And the idea is that we're not supposed to just vote every 2 or 4 years, that all of us on a consistent basis are supposed to be actively involved as public citizens, not just voting every 2 or 4 years, but armchair experts on virtually everything. And the genius of our societies is collective. And we've gotten away from that. We really have. And I think that anybody, be it a disc jockey or a singer or a producer or a farmer or a housewife or a teacher or a student or a businessman, all of us have to ask ourselves, and the key line, I think, was written by a gentleman named Robert Zimmerman in 1964, Bob Dylan. It was called the song I forget, I think, well, I'll just give you the line. He who is not busy being born is busy dying. And to a really true extent, I would say that we are, in many cases, in our both respective societies, much more imitating the last years of the Holy Roman Empire than busy being born. The whole concept that I'm sort of working on this year in 1977 as we wind it up is that of the dance band on the Titanic. I think, frankly, our respective industries right now are functioning like the dance band on the Titanic, which is to create diversions in the ballroom so that nobody worries about the icebergs outside. And the introduction that I do when I do that song live is I'll just do it. It is 1912. We are in the British Isles. It is April the 12th. And the triumph of technology. The first time man has conquered nature. The unsinkable vessel is about to set sail. And you are there.